Hi. Hi. 50 is the number of the evening. We're 50. Hi, everybody. I'm Mindy Fila, and I am gathered tonight with some of our Sesame directors. I am not going to read your bios. I am going to share a fun fact about you all, and I'm going to say your name. So please raise your hand when I say your name so the audience will know who you are. I'm going to start off with Matt Vogel. Hi, Matt. Matt, where are you?
It's me.
Little fun fact about Matt is that he was a lead singer of his band called the Mighty Weaklings.
This is true.
Ken Diego. Hi, Ken. Ken works with Oscar the Grouch, but he also works with the Oscars, the Academy Awards out in LA.
True.
True. Marilyn Agrillo. Hi, Marilyn.
Hello.
Marilyn is an expert TV binge party thrower.
Oh, yeah.
When's your next party, Marilyn?
Sunday night, Game of Thrones.
Okay, great. And Ben Lehman.
Hello, everyone.
Ben Lehman is an avid dancer. He loves to dance.
I do. I'll break out moves later.
So welcome. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to start off with the first question, and this is for all of you guys. Basically, you hear this all the time, and it's actually in our show Open, the song. It's a simple question in the song, and it's like, can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? And what I want to hear from you guys is how did you get to the sunniest street in town? What was your journey when you first came to set? What was that feeling? What was that like? So take a moment and think, and whoever wants to answer first.
I'll answer. I actually was introduced to the two of you at a DGA Showrunners event, which is an event where the DGA invites people that work on different shows and invites directors. This one was about, I think, for women and minorities. And I had a great meeting with these guys, and a few months later they called me and asked me if I wanted to come in and direct a little music video. And it's hard to describe the feeling of going in and actually seeing the Muppets and people operating them, and it was fantastic. The first of quite a few amazing experiences.
Yeah, it was such a great event, by the way. Kudos to the diversity committee.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go.
Go, Ben.
Okay. I came to Sesame Street 17 years ago, which is hard to imagine, sitting here with you all. And I started literally as a production assistant. I had had a career as a camera assistant and a camera operator, and I was kind of making a shift, and I had the good fortune to be hired in the international department. Sesame Street makes, I think Ray mentioned it, co-productions around the world, local versions, as well as versions dubbed into the local languages of the American show. And so I started as a PA and kind of, I was in love with the show, I was in love with the Muppets, but then once I started working on it and learning the rich history of it, and I went through the ranks from being a control room PA to being an associate director to then starting to direct, and it's been the greatest learning experience on so many levels, but truly the greatest learning experience of my professional career, and a wonderful place to work.
I had already been working at Children's Television Workshop since 1986. I worked on Square One TV, a math show, which I adored working on. And then I did some work with 321 Contact. And at the time, Sesame, occasionally they would shoot remotes and they would call me to see if I could come over and help them. And I was never available. But then in season 25, when the show expanded and moved to Queens, they asked me if I would come on board as an AD, and I happily accepted. And I spent, I'd say, half my time in the studio and half my time in the edit room putting together the shows. I would sometimes do night shifts in the edit room and then 2 or 3 days a week in the studio. So
Wait, night shifts? Like
yes,
how?
as in 5 p.m. to midnight. There were at the time it was 130 shows
Right.
a year, a season, and there were two edit shifts a day, and I took a couple of the night shifts each week and 2 or 3 studio days. Tried not to have that quick turnaround, but it was fun. It was great to see the show. It was a great way to learn the show in the edit room and carry that into the studio.
Matt?
So I never dreamed that I could grow up to work on Sesame Street. I was part of the first generation of Sesame Street viewers. I made my own puppets out of t-shirts and masking tape, and I made my little brother do puppet shows for the neighborhood kids with me. And then I went to school to be an actor, and I got a BFA in theater, and I did some directing in school, and I moved to New York, and I saw an ad in Backstage that said, it was a picture of Kermit the Frog, and it said, "Do you measure up to be a Muppet?" I answered the ad, and now 23 years later, I guess that I could grow up to work on Sesame Street. And I guess I do measure up to be a Muppet. So I'm one of the Muppet performers, but I'm also a director. And being a puppeteer on the show, it's almost a logical next step for a performer to become a director for some puppeteers. Because I don't know if you know this, but the performers all day, all we do is we look at, other than talk and laugh
Goof off.
and goof around, is we look at the program feed. We look at the line cut. Sesame Street, it has 3 cameras, and we do a 3-camera line cut, and that's all we do all day long. We are looking at that. The camera is our eyes, and we perform to that, fine-tune our performance, and it's a logical next step for some puppeteers to want to try directing, which I did. Try acting as well. It was a logical next step, and so I've been a director since 2008.
Correct.
Was that the question, or were you wanting to know if I drove or I took the train, and that's how I got to Sesame Street? Because sometimes.
I just want to add something because to the point that Matt made, so we're doing a line cut, and all the performers are watching the line cut as it develops. So as a director, it's actually a fascinating challenge because you have 12 other directors with you working
Opinions.
simultaneously, giving you notes at the end of every take. So it really is a very interesting.
Intimidating.
Yeah, because the performers do have an opinion.
They do.
And they will give it. Do we really need that close-up on me? I think it plays better on the wide. It looks better because the comedy plays better. Okay, I'll give you the wide then.
And sometimes the note is a good note. So.
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes,
We reject the note,
Yes.
or we change in post. Many of us have multiple roles at Sesame, and I just wanted to highlight and ask you guys some questions. You're also one of our associate directors for the show. Can you talk about how you get everybody in the control room to focus, the whole front row, to really rally and stay on track and to support the director each and every day? Because that, I think, is one of the hardest jobs, I think, there. I've tried it, and I didn't like it.
Yelling. No, I don't yell, actually. I'm not a yeller. But I try to give every position a heads up on what might be coming down the road in that scene and have them be ready for it. The audio team, the video team, the technical director. We do a lot of support for the puppet performers And that would be if there are graphics that need to go on the screen, it's very helpful not only to have a line cut, but to map in those graphics, position them. If there's something that a performer needs to play off of, it's great to show them as much as possible. So I work with the team in the control room and the cameras as well, to carry out the director's plan, but also to give the Muppeteers as much context as possible. So it's a lot of giving people heads up and a little bit of a look down the road. This is coming next, this is coming next, this is coming next. It's that sort of thing.
Also, I would say for you, Ken, you are on top of everything. And when you're working with puppets, there are changes that are made. We can make plans months in advance and know which camera shots we think we're going to plan on. And then when we get to the moment and the puppet just doesn't look right, or we can't get it in the right position, or it's just a weird thing and we have to make changes, Ken and our other ADs are right on top of it. And really, I don't know how you're able to compartmentalize and pay attention to all of that.
You
It's
see
amazing.
things that no one else can see or saw. So, yeah,
No,
special eyes. Matt, can you talk about your role as a Muppet captain? What does that mean?
It's a very fancy word. I'm the Muppet captain, the puppet captain on Sesame Street. I am the captain of all the puppets, which really just means I'm kind of like a coordinate for the production team. I'm at the production meetings. I consult with the directors and find out what they want to shoot and how they want to shoot it. And because of my puppetry background, I can try to help them out and say, here's what we could do. You could do this, or you could do this. And then I troubleshoot with script ideas ahead of time. I troubleshoot things that I'm like, I don't know if we can do that. And then I see edits, and sometimes I give notes on edits after somewhere along the chain, just to kind of help out with, for some reason that puppet doesn't look great in that shot. Can we fix that? I also act as a casting director for our group of 14 Muppet performers. So we have one-time characters that come in, and I'll cast somebody as, customer number 4. That's pretty much it. I know how many chickens you can fit into a wheelbarrow.
That's great. Okay, so everyone up here tonight selected clips to show tonight and explain a little bit about them. They all directed them. So Ben, we're going to start with you. So if you want to set up your clip, and then we'll roll the clip, and then we'll do a little Q&A.
Okay, great, thank you. So I have 2 clips I'm showing tonight. The first one is a sizzle from a special that I directed a couple of years ago called The Magical Wand Chase, which I'm super proud to say was nominated for a DGA award. And it's basically, it was a fascinating special because Abby, who is our resident fairy and has powers of magic, poofs up some hot air balloons, and the Sesame Street Muppets fly off into New York, but they lose her magic wand and they have to go on an adventure to try to get it back, and they get lost, and they befriend kids throughout New York that help them find their way back to Sesame Street. So we'll see a short sizzle of that, and then in honor of our 50th anniversary, I've got, we did a counting to 50 song, and so I have a short cut down of that song, which is all about Abby and Elmo learning how to count to 50.
No one's seen that before, right?
No.
That hasn't come out yet.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Matt. It's a sneak peek.
Sneak peek.
It's hasn't aired. It's actually it's unmixed. You guys are really seeing like a rough sizzle of. But it's. I think you'll get a kick out of it. So.
Roll the clip.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll point out that the zero was performed by Matt Vogel.
Oh, thank you.
And just another word about the special, it was a fascinating, because it was shot on location and in the studio, and so it was a hybrid of single camera location shooting all over New York City, which is not easy to do with the Muppets, but is super gratifying, and as you can see, they look amazing. and then trying to find that balance between the multicam studio look and the location-based single camera shooting was, you know, just a very interesting challenge. And then, of course, the joy of turning Elizabeth Banks into an elephant. So, thank you.
And shooting with kids.
Yes, and shooting with kids, always fun.
Also, counting to 50 seems like a hard concept for the young audience to understand. So are we taking a risk creating an insert counting, you know, above 20? Usually we don't go higher than 20.
I mean, you know, I think obviously the year calls for it, and you know, we might get into it later in the panel, but we do work with a curriculum team. We have an education team that's on staff, and they advise all the content that we produce, you know? So basically it was their idea to, okay, counting to 50 is hard, and it might be tedious, honestly. But why don't we count by 10? And what you guys didn't see is there is an animation that will be part of the final piece that actually shows those number bars that kids have in preschools and kindergarten that are, you know, they're designed their length is exactly 10 individual units. And so we kind of show that as we scale it up to 50 to help get that concept across to our young audience.
Great. Ken, you're up next.
Okay, so I have a little montage of 3 different clips. The first one is Marilyn Horne singing C is for Cookie. And when I first started working on Sesame Street, that was one of the first pieces I got to work on, and I was blown away. It was my first wow moment. We spent an afternoon creating this majestic operetta-style piece, and it was hilarious, and the production values were so wonderful that I just was blown away. And so I was an AD on that piece, directed by the late, great Lisa Simon. And the other 2 pieces, one is from a Crummy Pictures series that there were 5-minute bits that involved Cookie Monster in various movie trailers of the time. And it's one of the many highlights I've enjoyed as a director on Sesame Street. When I think back over the years, and I've been there for 26 years, so about half the life of Sesame Street. It's something that comes to my mind frequently. And then the last piece is something, a very important initiative involving Julia, our new autistic character. And this, I was privileged to direct the Meet Julia episode, and that's an excerpt from Meet Julia. So, enjoy.
Great, roll the clip.
There really were so many great moments over the years for all of us. It was really hard to
Call it down.
boil this down to a few scenes. And there's a lot missing from these scenes that you're not seeing that were wonderful. Alan had a fabulous scene with Julia, getting her to quiet down and focus and settle herself so that she could feel well enough to come back into the group and continue to interact with Bird and Elmo and Abby. In the C is for Cookie piece, you know, Cookie Monster comes in at the end, spots a cookie on the pyramid, yanks one out, and all the pyramids collapse. You know, had to leave that out, unfortunately, for time. But and then for Les Mis, I mean, there were so many scenes that we could have shot that I'm sure had to come out of the script. But those were really fun pieces to work on.
Great. Marilyn?
So I was very privileged to direct a few episodes of Monster Foodies, which is a cooking show of sorts. It's with a little Muppet named Gonger and with Cookie Monster, who run a food truck. And on every episode of Monster Foodies, a customer calls in and requests them to make them something. And as they're consulting the recipe, invariably there's an ingredient that's missing, or Cookie Monster has eaten it and they can't make the desired recipe, so they have to go to a apple orchard or a cranberry bog or some kind of farm to get that one missing ingredient. And there the farmer tells them how things are grown, and it's a little moment in where food comes from and how it's harvested. It's super cute. And I also have a clip from Elmo's World, which does not involve any puppets. It is Ms. Noodle, who is the sister of Mr. Noodle, who was and still is played by Bill Irwin. And now Ms. Noodle is played with the fabulous Ilana Glazer, who is a joy to work with. And that's what you'll see.
Great. Roll the clip. I want to know, what were the challenges when you were shooting with Cookie live hand puppet with his hands, and then Gonger with rod puppet hands, tiny, tiny hands, and all of the food and inside of a truck, like...
So whenever you're going to work with the puppets and they have to handle props, you have to plan ahead to either rig something up or just, plan the size of the prop they're going to handle. Gonger has tiny little hands, and they're on rods. And Cookie Monster has live hands, so the puppeteer's hands are actually inside like gloves, and it's easier to hold things. With the cooking segments, the puppeteers are below, and they're stirring, and they're sometimes dumping a measuring cup of flour into a bowl. They're doing all these intricate things, and it's challenging. So there's a little advanced work involved in rigging these props and getting it together. And also, I have to say, these episodes are all tightly scripted, but the chemistry between these two puppeteers and the characters that they portray is fantastic. And whenever the Muppets go off script, it's a magic moment, and usually it ends up in the show because it's just fantastic, and the physical comedy is amazing. One other thing, I've also made a few little 1-minute documentaries that are part of Monster Foodies. I shot one in a cranberry bog where the two of them went to, find the missing ingredient, which was cranberries. And I did one in the Midwest in an oatmeal factory. And about a week before we went to shoot the oatmeal factory, the head of the factory calls me up and says, "Everybody here is very excited, and I really need to manage expectations. Can you please tell me, is Cookie Monster coming with you?" And I was like, "No, it's me and a guy with a camera, sorry." The cranberry bog people wanted to know if Cookie Monster needed waiters too. It's always kind of like, are they still going to let me come if they know it's not with Cookie Monster? Anyway, so those are great to do. And the other thing with Ms. Noodle is fantastic. To work with an actor and elicit all these emotions, surprise, disappointment, idea, the light bulb of the idea, with in a nonverbal way. It's really fun for an actor to do that, and it's really fun to be so expressive and so over the top, and it's really fun to direct those.
Great. Matt?
That must be me now.
Yeah.
All right, so in my reel, you're going to see 2 street stories, which are the stories that are usually the beginning of Sesame Street. One of them is about a Sesame safari, and you will see Grover and a bunch of other characters crammed into a very tiny, custom-made car, and there's also an elephant in there. And then in the second clip is about a factory, Elmo's factory, and you will see a crazy magical machine that Abby has created in order to help the gang make these little pencil holders. Then you're going to see a Crummy Pictures piece. The Crummy Pictures, like Ken was saying, they're all movie parodies, and they have to do with Cookie Monster's self-control. They all have a curriculum, and so they are all along that line of things. So this is called a Veggies. It's an Avengers parody that I liked doing very much. I liked because I was trying to find just some iconic images from the first Avengers movie. So like there's like this, almost 360 shot of the heroes, which kind of was exciting to try to shoot with a bunch of puppets. And then there's, what's the last one? Oh, Elmo the Musical. Then there's an Elmo the Musical called President, and that was a lot of fun to shoot as well. And we'll talk maybe more about Elmo the Musical after the clips. Roll the clip.
Thank you.
So just to work backwards, just a couple little things. So in those Elmo the Musicals, most everything is shot on blue screen. We had some real items in there, the desk, the phone, and the door frame, and that was it. Everything else was blue and was created in post. So that was kind of a fun challenge to figure out where the presidents were and where, the geography of the room. Something about, I wanted to talk about that, the factory moment. So that's like a lot. Usually we shoot with 3 cameras. That was all single camera shots. And then we put it together. And I just remember with the editor saying, like, pull out 3 frames on shot 4, pull out 2 frames of shot 6. And, just kept getting revised edits of that. And then the last part was about that same show. The part you didn't see was this long assembly line, and we had 5 characters: Bert, Ernie, Abby, Rudy, and Elmo. And so there are 5 characters, but underneath, below the frame, there were 12 performers passing along, trying to put this assembly line of this tiny little pencil holder together, because the pencil holder had to change from a toilet paper roll, and it had to be covered in construction paper and then get stickers, then it had a big line of things to happen to it, but 12 people were making that happen on screen. But you didn't see that.
Can you just briefly talk about the collaboration with the Jim Henson Company and the epic, puppets that they're making for the Veggies? And
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing. And they love to create these caricatures or these characters. They when they get a script, they will jump at the chance to create a Scarlett Johansson look-alike Muppet or an Iron Man or Onion Man puppet. And they're so creative. They're really fun collaborators to work with. And even all of those Crummy Pictures were really fun to collaborate with the writers and with the production team, just to try to accomplish, like, how can we make this look like the movie?
The animators.
And the animators, yeah.
Extensive storyboarding going into the shoot, and then also they would be with us as we shot to help us make sure that we were providing for them what they needed to create those environments, especially with the moving shots.
Yep. And we had like certain amounts of shots that we could do, moving shots. You have 4 chips. You may move 4 times.
Right.
I think that's what it was for Elmo the Musical, something like that. You have 4 chips you can move 4 times.
Great.
So it was fun.
So Sesame Street is a 30-minute show now. We produce the content 1 year before it airs. And I just want to talk about how we actually do it, how we put it all together. And we'll start with Ben. And I want to talk about the curriculum. Each year we have a new curriculum, but like, what goes into that? How do we work with the curriculum department? How do we know the kids are responding to that curriculum?
So I think I mentioned, so Sesame Workshop has a staff of educational curriculum experts. They're child development and psychology experts. And every year they basically convene, like the kickoff to a season of Sesame Street is a convening of a bunch of educational experts who have identified one need in the lives of children that will then be addressed over the course of a year-long series of Sesame Street. And you know, the needs change over time, which is why the show changes and the curriculum changes. And then they're there at every step of the way, you know, so they remain with us during the script writing process. They weigh in on every script, they participate in script review, then they are in the studio when we're shooting. They actually issue these are probably unique to, you know, to Sesame Street production, these kind of guidelines for directors and every different department to follow while you're shooting, so that you're actually presenting the educational goals of the show in the clearest and best manner, so that kids will get the most out of it. You know, Sesame Street came out of the idea of, you know, as was said before, that can television teach kids? And really the purpose of the show is to give kids, before they enter their formal education, an education through media. So, and then once we make the show, we don't just get ratings or that kind of feedback. We also get feedback from the educational experts. They take the shows, they do a summative evaluation with kids, with families, in school settings, in testing facilities, and they, you know, and it has been proven over multiple studies that kids who watch Sesame Street are actually better equipped to start their formal education.
Great. So before we shoot anything, we have production meetings. And Marilyn, I wanted you to talk about what it's like leading us through a production meeting.
Sure. So, for example, before a Monster Foodie segment or a Ms. Noodle segment is shot, the director goes to a large meeting and talks about the vision for shooting this particular segment. And the meeting is attended by a lot of people. There's the curriculum people, there's the writer, head writer usually, people from the Henson organization, people from post-production, music, people that make the props, the costumes, so you have art department there.
Lighting.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes, because sometimes there's a special need for a lighting cue or a special effect, and that has to be discussed. And during this meeting, you go through all of the special needs with props. As I said earlier, you know, the props have to be designed especially for the puppet's use and how things are going to be achieved, and everyone brainstorms on how a puppet can throw a ball, or they can stir a pot, or what kind of pot are we going to have. And after the meeting is done, there is this amazing thing called iMeet, which is, I don't know what you call that exactly. It's an intranet?
It's like a digital workspace, basically. It's our review workspace where every department puts every costume, every prop, every single thing that's going to play on a given day for the directors to weigh in. So
like they'll put up, these are the bathing suits we were thinking would be good for that beach scene, and you know, the director approves. A lot of people can weigh in. Props are up there. Script changes. It's a great way to work, and so
that's where the fun comes, when other people weigh in with counter opinions from yours.
Exactly. Yes, as I said, a lot of people. But that's basically how it goes, and the production meeting happens well in advance of the shoot to give everybody time, because everything's sort of custom made for these puppet segments.
Yeah, I think we try to have them 4 weeks out or earlier, but it's usually 4 weeks out.
I just want to say, as a director going into those meetings, the meeting is kind of a combination. Here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it, and it's also a creative meeting, because very often as a director you go into the meeting with as many questions as you have answers, and you learn a lot from the exchange with the other departments.
Can you talk about actually shooting on set? You know, you went through the production meeting and now it's your day, you're the director. What are you doing on set? What is the first thing you do when you get to set?
First thing is walking through with the stage manager, lighting, props, producers, and we'll visit each set location and talk about the shooting plan for each, where the cameras will be, when we'll need to stop to re-rig something or swap in something, how the set needs to be configured. We have parts of the Sesame set break apart, allowing more angles from different sides. And sometimes within the same scene, you will need to break it apart, but then put it back together because you're going to shoot from the opposite angle. So you have to talk about that and the flow of all of that. So we kind of walk through. And usually when that's done, it's time for the cast to come out, and then we'll start reading through before we block. So, and sometimes, depending on if we have a guest star, sometimes it's helpful to actually do a read-through of the entire script before we break it apart and go in shooting order so that we all get a sense of the flow.
Yeah, and even though some of us may have had that script for months, for our stage manager, for the cameraman, for sometimes the puppeteers, it might be the first time they're experiencing that script and knowing what it is that we're going to be doing that day. And so it's very helpful to do that walkthrough at the beginning of the day.
Ken, did you ever direct from the control room, or have you always been from the floor?
No, I did at the beginning. I'm trying to remember when the transition happened. I think it was in the...
When we moved upstairs?
Yes, exactly. We used to be in the larger stage at Kaufman Astoria, and all the directing was really done from the control room and using the SA or talking through the stage managers. It was sort of impersonal. And then we left that stage and went to a smaller stage upstairs at Kaufman, and at that point, we had a director's cart built where it was a roll-around cart, all the camera angles were there, and the director really never had to leave the floor. It's much more efficient to work that way. You're right there, you can see what's happening, and if there are some potholes you're hitting, you can see why, and you can help solve them right there. So it's a great way to work.
Agree. Yeah, no, even some of the producers sit on the floor now because it's like, it's where the action is. It's just easier to see what's going on. Yeah. But once we are done shooting, it's not over, then post-production happens. Matt, can you talk about the process of post-production?
So, sure. There's other than the edit, and for the directing part of it, it's trying to fine-tune the edit so that it gets down to, we have a target time of around 9 minutes, depending, 9.5, and sometimes they give us a little more space for certain stories, but we try to fine-tune the edit. Even though we're all basically working off of the line cut, when you don't work off the line cut and you just kind of have an editor go at it in any which way they want, the puppets end up looking not so great because we're doing, like I said before, we're playing to the line cut, so they end up looking odd. But then we add sound effects, we add music. Sometimes puppeteers perform more than one character, so maybe if I play the Count, maybe the Count and I also play Big Bird. If he's in a scene and they're both in a scene together, on the set I'll perform the one that has the most lines, and then in post I'll go in and ADR the lines for the Count, and another puppeteer will just have moved the mouth for me. And then, I don't know, then sweeten it, their button, they just turn a dial up and it's
The magical button.
I mean, but there's, a lot of, then they put the show together with the other segments. There's the street story, and then there's usually a little nugget in between, and then there's another segment of 4 minutes and another little nugget, and then another segment. Yeah,
So what do we do when we're watching a scene and we see a puppeteer's head in the shot? Because the puppeteers are below and the puppets are up here, so...
Well, if we haven't caught it on the day, which sometimes does happen, we now shoot in 4K, and so we're able to kind of blow up the screen a little bit, and so we don't see the head of the puppeteer so much. We actually have puppet caps, and some of the puppeteers have, like, if they have an aquamarine colored puppet, they have an aquamarine colored cap that they sometimes wear. But what's great is when you're like this, but what's not so great is when you move away from your puppet and then the aquamarine's over here and your puppet's over here. So working with puppets can be a challenge.
Yeah. And can you just talk about Puppet's eye line and how, it makes it makes it come alive. It makes the puppet.
Yeah. The eyes really are the window to the soul, but really they are for the puppets, especially when you're shooting with 3 cameras and a camera is playing the wide shot and there are 2 characters playing to each other. Everything looks great. Puppeteers are looking at the monitor, but then you cut to another camera for this character's close-up. There's a very subtle little change that the puppeteer, who has been doing this for, their whole life, they make a slight adjustment, may make the puppet look makes the puppet look a little better. When they don't make that adjustment, it looks like the puppet's neck is broken. Because they're doing a magic trick to this camera, but it doesn't look so good over on this camera. So, that's just some basic puppet knowledge.
I'm going to throw in, since we're using 3 cameras and we record them all the time, very often a performer can orient to 2 different angles within a scene, but when you try to throw that 3rd angle in and they haven't seen it, it definitely does not work in the edit. They don't feel alive.
Which provides problems when you have to cut things down for time, and you have to try to figure out what's the best solution for that. And we try to work out what might be the best solution. Sometimes it's a quick shot that may not look so great in a puppeteer's eyes, but maybe in the end of the day is going to be acceptable for that particular show.
Great. I think we're running out of time, but I do want to ask one other question about what is your favorite? Sesame Street connects with people, and it could be for the puppets, it could be the music, it's the inserts, and for me as a kid, I used to love this old random insert monster disco, and it was like literally these monsters, no core characters, running in and out of this disco, and it's just about in and out. It was like super bizarre, but I loved it. And I still, it's my favorite clip, I think, to this day. And so what I want to hear from you guys is do you have a favorite puppet or an insert or song that you want to share?
Anything with Cookie Monster will do. But, I actually have a love of some of the early Jim Henson live-action films that he made, and then I also really love those chef's films where the pastry chef comes up, and they might even be considered somewhat mean-spirited nowadays. I'm not sure we'd actually make them for the show now, but they're just so wonderful where he comes out, with 6 chocolate cakes, and then he falls down the stairs. I just found that so funny. But I think, in all seriousness, that's part of what drew me to the Muppets, is because they can do that. And they can, the number of times Grover falls over and then pops up, I am okay. It's magical. There is a certain amount of slapstick that you can do with the Muppets that you can't really do in other, with regular actors. So that's some of my favorite.
I have 2 that I really, really love, and they're both kind of old school Sesame Street. The first is anything with Bert and Ernie, to me, is heaven. Just the greatest. But also, I really, really, really love Monster Piece Theater, which is so brilliant, and it's like some of the best comedy I've ever seen. Ever in any medium. Monster Piece Theater. Run out and get it.
I love all the Muppets. I especially like Big Bird because of his innocence, and when he doesn't know something, or when he discovers something, or when he's really feeling an emotion, very strongly that always moves me. I'd say one of my favorite pieces is the Grover near far bit where he comes all the way down to the lens and demonstrates near and then runs way upstage, demonstrates far, and then he keeps doing it because he doesn't think the viewer is getting it until he finally collapses in exhaustion. That's one of my favorite pieces.
I say yes to all of these things. I agree with all of them. So I'm going to choose something that's a little more inside baseball. I think for me is that rather than a clip, for me one of my favorite parts is getting to work with heroes of mine, Carol Spinney and Jerry Nelson. And it's very important to me that I have had those times with those two gentlemen who taught me a lot. And that's it. That's my favorite thing, working with all of the people that we work with, and some of them also happen to be my heroes, yeah.
That's great. How are we doing on time? Time check. We have one more question, or? Okay, great.
Do they have another show in here or something coming up next?
All right, so I really like this question. So, silliest moment on set or in a meeting. So, what is the silliest, most Sesame Street thing you had to ask for on set or in a production meeting? Like, I need a brownie, but they don't know what a brownie means. It's not the food.
You're constantly asking, like, can I have another chicken? Or, this is one of my favorites, is what's going to be funnier here, a penguin or a chicken? And you do get into these, I mean, obviously Matt answered the question about how many chickens fit in a wheelbarrow.
5.
Right. But you are always, and there are so many special tricks, like, sometimes if Matt, playing Big Bird, needs to handle a prop and he needs both of his hands, you'll have another performer hidden behind Big Bird with a sleeve on that looks like the other. And there's just so many special moments. It's kind of hard to come up with the silliest moment, but I do always love what's funniest, a penguin or a chicken? Yeah. I'm still asking myself that question.
They're both funny.
Yeah. It's contextual.
Yeah.
Mine is something that happened kind of recently. I was doing a Mr. Noodle's brother, Mr. Noodle segment, and he was dressed as a dog, and he was sort of dancing around and rolling on the floor, and we kind of had it, but I said, let's do one more. Go up against that tree and put your leg up and pee. I just wanted to see if they would let me do it, and they let me do it.
Wait, we just watched that clip the other day in post, and we're like, can we maybe cut out of that before?
Well, speaking of Mr. Noodle, he does have a pet poodle named Schmoodle. And we have these puppeteerable fake dog paws. And sometimes we'll do a close-up of the real dog with the dog paw, and that's pretty silly.
Creepy.
Just regarding the food references, I think it was my first day as an AD on Sesame Street. We got back from lunch, and various puppeteers were asking for brownies and donuts, and I was like, did we not just get back from lunch? What's the matter with these people? So it was quite a learning process from there.
Right, and the brownie or donuts are things that they sit on.
We have, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. There we have a bunch of different things. We have brownies, which are these big brown cushions that used to probably be some sofa cushions that they pulled for us that we can lay on. And then donuts are these rolling bar stool tops, and that's how we get around the street. This set is built on the floor. So that's how the puppeteers move from place to place. They're sitting on a stool. We are sitting on a stool that rolls on the floor with our arms up in the air.
There's also a junior.
A junior, oh yeah, you lay back. It's a long one. It's very cumbersome.
It's like a rolling divan.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Silliest moment. Again,
That's
yes, yes. The funniest things for me is just there are times on set when whatever the situation is, and that we will just lose it and cannot contain our laughter. And when you're directing, has a delicate balance because I want them as a director to be childlike. They are playing kids and goofy monsters and other big giant birds. So I want them to be light and happy and youthful. And at the same time, I want to get out and to make my day. So, but those times when we're laughing and just truly enjoying the work that we're doing, which happens very often, is the silliest and most joyful for me.
Great. So I think we're going to open the floor to some questions, but before we do a Q&A, I think we have somebody else that wants to join us.
See, I've already given it away because I've
and
got
I think
the
Matt's going to
bag
help
on the
us
lap and
make that happen.
now I'm not ready, and I was trying to be ready.
Sorry.
And so this is the count puppet. I can't really think of a graceful way to do that.
It's all right.
There is no graceful way to do that. Greetings, it is I, the Count. And you know why they call me the Count? Because I love to count things. 1, 2, 3. Do we have time for me to count everyone in the audience?
Go for it.
Seriously?
No, maybe estimate.
Estimate. Count by tens.
Look like 120, 125, 127.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Who has a question? For me or for any of these people up here? You mean me or this guy?
And I'm a huge fan. And
Thank you.
even the hand movements, everything about him is great.
Well, thank you. My right hand, unfortunately, is pinned to my jacket, but otherwise it would be... Oh, yes, look at that. It is marvelous.
He has multiple capes.
Yeah, the artists at the Jim Henson Company know how to build a puppet, and the Count to me is one of the more beautiful puppets that I've seen. It's amazing when you're really close, and the trick with them is that you can't see any of the seams. There's a seam that runs right down here, all the ears. You can't see any of the seams. They have this Henson stitch that's like a magic stitch, so you can't see it because they're meant to be seen on TV and in close-up.
And in HD, and in Ultra HD.
That is correct. You're right, Kenneth.
Yeah, I mean, truly the workshop pioneered this model of research and testing TV shows, and all preschool television does it now. But it really is the Sesame Workshop model of identifying a need, creating the content, testing it, rinse and repeat. And so it really is unique. So thank you for... we've never reused one, but we tried to build on a previous season. So a few years ago, so for example, we did STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And when at the time it was identified that kids in the American educational system were lacking in that specific area. And then the very next year we did STEAM, which was basically the application of STEM concepts to art. So it's frequently, kind of a continuation of the previous season.
I feel like the Count's looking at me.
I'm looking right at you, Mindy.
You're like...
I mean, the Count is on every day because he has the number of the day.
It's an ensemble of characters that are all really vibrant and have a lot of fun stories that our writers tell. And then you're right, Ben. I mean, we do see all the characters every day now. We see them in different segments throughout the show. Early on, there weren't really stories so much. It was more just little bits. And you would only see really Big Bird and Oscar, I think, on the street at first, regularly. Yeah, and then you would see other characters as we went along.
Yeah, I mean, so the kids in the Magical Wand Chase were all professional actors with varying levels of experience. I mean, a couple of things when working with children is, one, try not to do it for 12 hours a day. A, it's illegal.
Oh,
so just don't.
You're going to get in trouble.
And,
right.
But B, it's like past 3 or 4 hours, you kind of lose. They lose their focus, they lose their patience, you lose them, and then it's just like you saying the line and having them repeat it like a robot, and it's just never good. And then the really tricky thing with kids, especially younger kids, is that because the puppeteers all have monitors, one of the hardest things is to tell the kids, don't look at the TVs. Because there's basically TVs everywhere on the floor, and they're just like this.
And they see their face on it, so they
Yeah.
just want to look at it and wait.
Exactly. It's fascinating. I mean, you know, like as directors, we all think about, you know, obviously we know that a lot of Sesame Street is being watched on phones and iPads and tablets and, you know, not in a linear television broadcast world anymore. So I think as directors, we all think about that. Like, how are we framing our shots? How are we telling the stories? If someone is going to be watching it on a tiny little device, do I want to look at, you know, the staging and the storytelling in a different way? I think, you know, educational TV is deemed important and valuable. So I feel like it's an area that's a growth area. You know, I don't know what's coming in the future. Obviously, virtual reality is huge. It's for our audience. We've experimented with it a lot at the workshop, and we've done a lot more augmented reality than virtual reality, because for kids, you know, it's the same kind of issue with 3D. When your head is really small and your eyes are close together, there are certain dangers to putting on a giant headset on your head. Plus, it freaks a lot of parents out. So, but I do think, you know, I think site-specific and interactive entertainment is really, really important for this age group.
And the thing about Sesame Street is it's always has been and always will be an experiment in television, and we are constantly paying attention to what children are into and what interests them and how they learn, and that's how we evolve, and that's what I think anybody getting into the business should be doing as well.
I'll speak to that. I've done a few scenes with her. There's another layer of performance involved. You have to, at times, throw out the Muppet rulebook in terms of performance, because you really don't want her to make as much eye contact. And then she's got certain mannerisms that need to be recreated. So it's all the things that are involved with puppetry with another layer on top of it, I would say, where you have to deconstruct some of it so that she appears more realistic.
That's true, and we worked a long time with the performer of Julia to try to come up with a language, a physical puppetry language, an emotional language that worked for her, but didn't sacrifice the puppetry or the story that we were trying to tell through Julia's eyes.
Right. And the puppeteer has a son who's autistic, and so she kind of channels that in her performance. But as she gets better and better as a performer, we almost have to do more deconstruction with her to keep the character realistic.
Yeah. And we have advisors that are on set with us and helping us through the process every step of the way, which is reassuring.
I mean, I will say they've been fabulous partners. They're, you know, we actually upped the number of shows when we went to HBO as our primary distributor. Obviously, PBS is a longtime and cherished partner of the workshop, and we are still on PBS. Creatively, they are completely hands-off. They're great collaborators. They've allowed us to make specials, and those they're a little bit more involved in creatively, and they give notes. But overall, you know, it's been pretty seamless. I have to say, from the production side, and you guys can speak to the directing side, it was a pretty seamless transition, and you know, it didn't feel like, oh, new partner in town.
Yeah. And they love promoting the show as well.
They do.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Last question?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, I mean, so every co-production is kind of a unique model. The way the workshop works is we'll find a partner internationally, and then we'll work with local producers, local performers, local directors, local research consultants, so that they can advise on, what are the needs of kids in that region. So, for example, in Egypt, it's about girls' education. And there are different curriculae for different areas.
And they'll create a character for that need.
Yes.
And they'll create a neighborhood for that need. They'll create the world around that specific area.
Yeah.
Right? They do that for them.
Absolutely. So, I think Plaza is still going strong in Mexico, and we've had a co-production that was kind of a hybrid with Univision in the U.S., where we used some of the U.S. show and produced some new stuff and took some segments from Plaza. There's been, in Latin and Central America, there's actually quite a few co-productions that are going strong. And it's always been, part of the workshop's mission to reach kids in the U.S., but around the world as well. And I'm sure you guys, most of you have heard about the work we're doing with IRC for refugee kids in, Syrian and Iraqi refugee kids. So there is much work going on internationally. On this stage, we're kind of lifers, aren't we?
I think so, yeah.
Well,
I think we're in.
it's a good gig, and people don't really leave. It was my first job out of school, and I haven't left, but it's been a unique experience for me because I started out as an assistant, and I just kind of went up every couple of years. Went down, production stage managing, producing. So I don't know if I'm going to leave.
I'm not.
I'm a freelancer, and I am drawn to the show still. I started as an AD. I started directing there as well, but I loved being involved with the show, and I continued to be an AD as well as a director, and it was a great way to stay with the show and as it develops. It's just, you feel rewarded at the end of each day by the work that you're doing. It's not just the paycheck, so it's really a great feeling.
I work at Sesame Street the least of anyone on this stage. I'm a freelancer as well, and I only get the opportunity a few times a year, which are always great. But I'm immersed in the world of Sesame Street because in a completely independent production, I am directing a documentary feature called Street Gang, which is about the origin of Sesame Street. And it basically tracks the story from 1966 to 1990. And it's about the little group of activists and creative geniuses that started this whole thing. And then it was officially known as like the first experimental season, the second experimental season. And it was really groundbreaking in every way. So hopefully this film will be in theaters next year.
Well, Marilyn, if you were looking to interview a Transylvanian count, what are your days like? Or nights, to be precise.
Why don't you go to the Games of Thrones party she's throwing on Sunday night?
I'm there.
Well, thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you all up here on the panelists. It was great talking to you and seeing the clips.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much.